Well, Thierry, so it's just I'm just trying to get into Kudus's head, and that's what this whole presentation is about. Just to
FM,
try and understand why he chose West Ham, and then provide some more perspective on what went on. I remember my thoughts don't represent that of Mohammed Kudus's. It's just more of conjecture. And so let's head straight into it, where the main reason why we're here today is to answer the question: is West Ham the ideal destination for Mohammed Kudus? I'm sure when he was tearing the World Cup apart for the Black Stars a few months ago, a lot of people would have thought that the next big move for Kudus would be to a great club, a big club. No disrespect to West Ham, they're a fantastic club, but maybe a lot of people thought Kudus would move to a tier 1 club. I'm speaking of Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester United, Liverpool, etc. But this also happened. And so after a good World Cup and a very good season with Ajax, what we did witness was that at the early part of the transfer window, Chelsea and Arsenal expressed their interest in the Ghanaian. But there was no real follow-up, and the deal never really substantiated. And so the two of them sort of cooled off with their interest in Kudus. Now, what happened was that in July, Brighton agreed a fee with Ajax. Now, Kudus himself had made it clear that he wanted to leave the club, wasn't willing to extend his contract, which was ending in less than 2 years. And so what we did know was that Kudus was going to leave at the end of the transfer window. Now, Brighton came in, their fee was accepted, and it was widely reported that personal terms couldn't be agreed. And the most reported story was the fact that it was a release clause that Ajax, Kudus and his team were demanding, which I did a bit of research on, and I can confirm that that is completely false. The reason why Kudus did not move to Brighton was not because of a release clause. There was no talk of that, and it was other personal terms which they couldn't come into agreement with, and so it had nothing to do with a release clause. Unfortunately, the deal broke down. And then West Ham came along, tried a couple of times, and he ended up choosing West Ham. And so, there's been a lot of talk. If you look around social media, people saying, yeah, West Ham is not the best club for Kudus. He's probably bigger than them. But I think it's the ideal next step. Now, here's the strategy. If you're a player around 23, everyone dreams of playing Manchester United, the Liverpools, the big clubs. Kudus himself grew up supporting Barcelona. And so maybe it's one of the clubs that he may look at in future, or Manchester United, or the big clubs in England, or Bayern Munich, or these big European clubs. But if you don't get access to them right now, which is not happening, there is another route to these big clubs, and that's half a step. That's what I think Kudus has done with this West Ham move, because he enters a zone where he will still be seen, and these big clubs will still follow his development, and you still get the opportunity to get that move in the next couple of years or so. So now let's get into Kudus's head, and probably why he chose West Ham over Brighton. I think about 2 seasons ago, if you look at the data for wages, now listen to this important quote from Igalo. When he went to Saudi Arabia, he said at the end of the day, trophies and all of those things are not going to buy food in the supermarket. And so you cannot negate the fact that players look at what they will make from transfers. And so this is just a quick comparison of the average wages for players at West Ham and Brighton. Just to point our heads up, this data is from 2 seasons ago. And so the average salary at West Ham was close to twice as much as what people at Brighton, players at Brighton were earning. And so immediately you are able to get a sense of how well players are paid in West Ham and Brighton. Now, if you look at it comparatively, Brighton were the 3rd lowest paying side in the Premier League 2 years ago. At the same time, West Ham were the 9th, and so they were in the top 10 in terms of paying their players well. Just to give you an idea, Mohammed Kudus's fee is about 40 million. That would make him the 2nd most expensive West Ham signing in history. And so you can get an idea or clue as to how much Kudus would be making. He wouldn't make what the average would be making because he is close to being a record signing, and so he would earn a lot more. But even if he was earning the average, tell you what, it's twice what he was earning at Ajax. And so for a 23-year-old, that's good money, and that's definitely something that he would consider going forward. But even beyond the money, You're looking at a West Ham team who have a lot of heritage, a lot of history, a lot of prestige. They recently won the Conference League, making it 4 European trophies that they've won in their history. They've been in existence since the 1890s. And you look at performances, and what a lot of people forget is that there's that recency bias. West Ham had a bad season last time round, in and around the relegation spot for most parts, but they still ended up 14th. And the interesting thing is that if you look at their last 10 seasons since they gained promotion, 5 out of those 10 seasons, they finished in the top 7. They finished in the top half, my bad. And so 5 out of those 10 seasons, they finished in the top half. That's the top 10 of the league. And then on 3 occasions, they've actually finished in the top 7. And so this is a West Ham side where, if you're looking at extended data, they've performed really well in the Premier League. And they've had stints and opportunities to even get to Europe. This time around, they're in the Europa League because they won the Conference League. Now, how does Kudus slot into this West Ham team? To answer that, you need to understand how West Ham play. And if you wanted that in one match, a video to show how West Ham play, you just have to rewatch the game against Brighton over the weekend. That's David Moyes for you. It's prime counter-attacking football. When he had the whole league on strings, if you look back at somewhere around the 2021-2022 seasons, where David Moyes finished in the top 7, West Ham were really good in that season. They scored the most number of goals from counter-attacks. And so that was somewhere around 7 goals that they scored from counter-attacks that season. That was the most by any team. And so we can establish that West Ham under Moyes thrive in counter-attacking situations. And it's not surprising to see that Moyes is trying to revisit that formula, where this season they've already got 2 goals from the counter-attack, and that's the most by any team so far this season, although the sample size is really small this time around. But you look at someone like Kudus, where in the last 2 seasons where he's had some majority or a lot of his playtime, you're looking at progressive carries. So that's basically, Kudus moving with the ball forward. And that's something that he does really well. Last season, he had 66, progressive carries, was ranked 5th in the Ajax team, and 37th in the whole league. And it's one of his standout key areas because even this season, which just recently started, he ranks number 1 for Ajax and then 6th in the Eredivisie for progressive carries. And so in this system, I think it would bring the best out of him. Now, it's in a comparative case once again because Brighton play some really good football. Kudus probably would do well there, but I think that in Brighton, he would thrive within a unit. Whereas West Ham, it requires more of an individualistic effort. And that's the system which I think brings the best out of Kudus. If you're looking at his key strengths, he loves to, be on the half 10, has space to run into, and that's what brings out his strength, not necessarily, breaking down a low block like Brighton usually face and all that. So I think these statistics definitely back Kudus to thrive in David Moyes' system, looking at how they've played their football and what some of his strengths are. And also, one of the key things that are very, very essential in a counter-attacking system is your ability to be able to dribble past opponents, because that's the whole point. You're running at top speed, you're meeting defenders, and you have to be fast in how you think. And Kudus excels really well at that. In the last Eredivisie season, he had 91 take-ons. That was the most by any player. If you actually look at the top 7 leagues in Europe, only Messi and Vinicius had more take-ons than him. If you're looking at domestically, take-ons per game, he was 4.6. That's the most ever recorded in a season since Opta started taking data from 2010 in the Eredivisie League. And so he's very adept at going past his players. And that's something that David Moyes probably wants, that X factor, someone who can beat his man, because you're looking at a team, maybe without Paqueta and Bowen, they struggle in that aspect. So definitely I think Mohammed Kudus adds a lot of value to this team. If he didn't, West Ham won't take out 43 million of the money that they got from Rice and invest in him. The reason why Tim Stuyton, who is the technical director of the Hammers, traveled to Netherlands, and followed the team all the way to Bulgaria for the Europa League qualifiers was because David Moyes wants Kudus, and now he has him. And I think the two of them are going to make a really good partnership where we may see the best come out of the Ghanaian. Now, remember, I said that West Ham is only half a step. The dream for Kudus is still that tier 1 club. And another key thing in this West Ham move is that, by indication that the Hammers have allowed the sell-on clause for Ajax, it only gives us a hint that they are open to selling. And that stance on its own is probably better than what you'd have seen at Brighton, who are a bit more difficult to negotiate with. And so I'm sure all parties in the deal know that Kudus will not be spending the 5 years that he has signed at West Ham. He will probably be moving on to a bigger club soon. He still has the privilege of playing in London, playing at a very big stadium at the London Stadium. And he's still playing in the Premier League, which is the most watched league in the world. So I think this move ticks all the boxes, and the most important thing is that Kudus remains fit and continues to perform well. And once he does, I think West Ham would become the platform, like we've seen with Declan Rice, that Kudus uses to move on to the next level.
Brilliant. Absolutely.